Okay, so let's get started with our researcher adoption of ORCID FAQs. Is everyone ready? All right. So don't forget, for the people that just joined us, there is a trivia component. So if you know any of the answers, you can either unmute or type into the chat. So the first question, let's do it. Okay. This is kind of a big question. There could be a lot of right answers. So how do we get researchers to use ORCID? Does anybody want to be a first person answering this question? All right, I see in the chat from Ellen, departmental or unit mandate. That is absolutely a right answer. Very valid answer, and that is definitely one way to get researchers to use ORCID, is to mandate it. Because there are a lot of right answers, I'm going to just take what I'm seeing in the chat as well. Mark, I'm seeing that you sent a link to the ORCID sign-in page. That's definitely where you would point people to go to get their ORCID ID and use it and sign in. So I'll take that as well. That's more of a kind of logistical answer. Christina, to connect all of their IDs together. Yeah, that is a good point to make to researchers when you're telling them about ORCID, is that it's interoperable, so it can kind of link different profiles, different identifiers that they have, and link those all together. So the ORCID kind of serves as a central hub for all of their other information that they have. From Tony, I see, show them how it integrates with digital measures. Absolutely, that is a great answer. Being able to demonstrate to researchers and have them actually see right there how having an ORCID ID and an ORCID record can benefit them by transferring that data from ORCID to another system like digital measures, that is a great way to get researchers on board using ORCID. This is awesome. I'm seeing so many answers in the chat. Mark, we do live registration at things like grad meetups. Yes, that is a great answer as well. I've heard from several organizations, universities mostly, having like a grad student orientation, or any other events that you're already doing. You can include a table with ORCID or information about ORCID, because a lot of people aren't doing things in person anymore. But yes, including ORCID in other events. I'm seeing from Christina an interactive workshop that got students to sign up during the workshop. Yes, this is great. These are all such great answers. Alicia, part of their faculty profile on Pivot. Yep, so they can link their ORCID ID to Pivot, and then their ORCID ID will show up there, and it just kind of yields more visibility and recognition to who they are, their online presence. I'm seeing Ellen, convince researchers that it's in their best interest to use ORCID to comply with publisher and funder requirements. It's a time saver. It helps with name disambiguation. Yes, yes, yes. All of that is really important. So great answers, because publishers and funders are increasingly starting to require ORCID, or even just offer it as an option for saving time, like the whole Science CV data transfer thing. So yeah, great answers. And then we use Pivot's public profile tool, Gallery, so everyone sees it. That is so great. Okay, there's so many answers in this chat. I actually will probably need to just take a moment to make sure I'm getting everyone's names, so your names can be entered in the wheel of names. Okay, I've got Ellen, Mark, Christina, Tony, Alicia. Okay. All right. So continuing with this question, these are all really, really, really great answers. Thank you, everyone who typed an answer into the chat. You are all right. I do want to point out that we have an outreach planning guide on our website. I'm just going to go out to that real quick. let me put the link in the chat so you all have it. So this is something that we put together maybe last year. I don't know, my sense of time is very distorted. But it takes you through an outreach planning checklist, so you can go through step by step all the different considerations for thinking about how to do outreach to researchers. It's also available as a PDF. If you want to print it out, you can just click on the PDF button and it looks all nice, and you can actually like check the boxes. And basically what this is just a bunch of ideas, examples, resources that we have, thinking about who's going to do the outreach. We've got examples from different member organizations. We have an ORCID 101 slide deck template with speaker notes, and all sorts of ideas, basics that you would need to know, and ideas for doing messaging to different audiences. So if you haven't looked at this, I'd recommend going through and just checking it out. We have a lot of good ideas and examples from across the community. And if you have new ideas or new things, especially now that a lot of things are happening more remotely and online, this is kind of a living document, so I'm always adding new stuff to it as, you know, as more resources and ideas come out. So definitely take a look at that. So that's just to kind of help us start to think about this idea of helping researchers learn about ORCID, get their ORCID ID, recognize how it will benefit them, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so next question. What if a researcher has more than one ORCID ID? Does anyone have thoughts about this? Want to give an answer? Speak now. Going once. Going twice. Oh, Christina. Oh, Tony. Okay, I just saw 3 chats come in all at the same time. 4. Okay. So, oops, they have more than one ORCID ID. We have a question, can they delete the one that is superfluous? The answer is yes. Isn't there now a way that ORCID can consolidate multiple IDs? Yes. And then, Mark, you can set one as the primary and others point to it. I believe that that is kind of right. Basically, if a researcher has more than one ORCID ID, they can choose which one they want to be their actual ORCID ID, and it will actually just deprecate the other ones. So, so I'll take all of those as right answers. Tony, Christina, Ellen, and Mark. I'm just keeping track on a little sticky note, and then I'll put your names in the wheel in a minute. But yeah, so all of those are basically right. I'll go to my next slide that has some resources about this. So the ORCID registry is designed to discourage people from having more than one ORCID ID. The idea is that you have one ORCID ID that stays with you throughout your entire career. And ORCID is set up so that the email address that the person uses to register for their ORCID account, you can only have that email address associated with one account. So if somebody tries to register for an ORCID ID with the same email that's already tied to a different account, they'll get a notification that says, hey, it looks like you already have an account. Is this you? So it really tries to stop people from having more than one ORCID ID. Of course, this happens all the time where somebody registers and then they forget, and so then they register again. And so ORCID will check for duplicates either based on name, or if they recognize that email address, you'll get that pop-up if you try to register for a second one. And there are a number of support pages online about this process and how that works. I'm not going to share these links right now, but I will share the link to the slides afterwards, so you'll have these links to learn more about that. But yeah, the idea is that one ID for one person is ideal, and then there are ways to deprecate other accounts, and there are mechanisms to keep people from creating more than one ORCID ID. Okay, I'm seeing some stuff in the chat. Has there ever been an issue where someone with a similar name to someone that already has an ORCID ID can't register? I haven't heard of this happening. When it does the name check, it will just show you the ORCID IDs that already are associated with that same name. But as we all know, that's kind of the point of ORCID, is that multiple people have the same name. So really that email address is the main component that would keep somebody from registering for an ORCID ID. And I haven't seen that happen where two people have the exact same email address and it stops them from registering. And then I see we have this come up if people move between institutions. Yeah. Is there a best practice to use a more generic email, or just be sure to update their email when changing institutions? Yeah, that's a really good point. So maybe somebody registered for an ORCID ID while they were at University of Oregon and they use their University of Oregon email address, and then they go to a different institution and register for another ORCID ID using a different email address. I mean, that is certainly possible. So one of the kind of best practices is to recommend, and ORCID also recommends this as the user's going through the process, but they recommend using more than one email address and having that tied to your account. So maybe you use your university email address, but also like your Gmail account. But again, it's really hard to make sure everybody does that. And, you know, if they forget that they already had an ORCID ID, they may still register for one using a completely new email address. So it's something that will happen. So the more we can make sure the message gets across to researchers that when they register for their ORCID ID, they should really continue to use that account for like the rest of their career, and that's how it's going to actually benefit them. We just need to really try to get that message across to people. So any opportunities that you do have where you're interacting with researchers about ORCID, you know, just make sure they know that. But of course, we're going to have lots of instances where somebody is just registering for ORCID and doing this on their own, and we are going to continue to run into people having more than one. But I think it really just does come down to that education component and making sure that that message gets across to people. So yeah, encouraging using multiple emails and educating folks. Perfect, thank you. All right, next question. Let's see, I have to minimize some of my screens to even see what I wrote here. Can an individual create more than one ORCID ID record if they want to have a separate record for different names they have used or go by, such as a stage name or pseudonym? Anybody know the answer to this? Let's see, I see from Laura, no need, they can add those name variations in their ORCID record. Yep. Christina, they should add their other names to their existing ORCID record. Tony says, I think yes, as long as each uses a different email account. And Ellen says they could, but it doesn't sound like a great idea. All of these are right answers, because this is kind of one where it's like, it kind of depends. So ideally, one person would have one ORCID ID. But if it is a rare case where, let's say that somebody is writing under a pen name and they want to stay anonymous kind of, but they don't want that work associated with, maybe they have a different body of work where they have their actual name attached to it. So the answer technically is yes, they can have more than one ORCID ID, one maybe for their pseudonym and the works related to that, and then one for their actual name and other works that they have going on. They do need to use a different email account for both, like Tony said. And so it is possible. So if somebody does have that special case, they can do it. They just need to have 2 separate email addresses. But in general, we are trying to encourage everybody to, you know, have one ORCID ID where they can put other names that they've used in that also known as section. But, you know, if somebody does have that circumstance where they really don't want to have, maybe have 2 bodies of work and they want to keep them separate for whatever reason. Although if you want to stay anonymous, I don't really know why you would want to have an ORCID ID. But anyway, it is possible. But all of these answers are correct, so I will take them. So I've got Laura. I've got Christina, Tony, and Ellen. And then Mark says Brian May could, as he is a rock star, PhD, astrophysics, and author, the Queen guitarist. Very cool, I didn't know that. But yeah, I'd like to see some famous people with ORCID IDs. That would be really cool. Okay, so we'll move on to our next question. What types of data can a researcher have in their ORCID record? And for this one, yeah, who knows the answer? Try to list as many of the different data types as you can. Or, you know, you can always feel free to unmute and say the answer too, if that's faster. And while you're thinking, I'm going to start putting names in the wheel. I got actually Mark, Christina. Anyone know the answers? What types of data can go in the ORCID record? Okay. Oh, I'm seeing some answers from Lily. Grants, publications, articles, book chapters, preprints, presentations, and more. That is correct. And Laura, personal info, education, employment, publications, conferences and papers, presentations, grant funding, any scholarly outputs. That's also right. Tony, books, book chapters, dissertations. Yes, all of that is right. And Ellen, education, works, funding, employment, distinctions, memberships, biography, social media, other names, keywords. Yes, all of that is right. Mark also says professional awards. Man, y'all are just getting all of the answers today. And I would take all of these as correct answers, but I'm gonna actually make a decision to, oh no, I already had Laura on there. I'm going by how many times you answered a correct question. Ellen's going on once more, and Christina and Tony. Okay, so I'm actually going to, okay, then Tony also added translations, conference proceedings, posters, papers. Yes, all of this is correct. The person who got the, let's see, in terms of the answer that I was looking for the most, the person who got, well, I'd say it's actually a tie between Laura and Ellen in terms of the amount of right answers. So I'm gonna put Laura and Ellen on the wheel again. Because what I was trying to go for with this question was really just capturing like all of the different sections of the ORCID record. And you two got, I think, the most of those sections. So back to the slides. We do have a page on our site that lists out all of the possible data fields in the ORCID record with the endpoint and a description of what can go in there. So I'll share this in the chat. So we do have this page that I hope is helpful, and each section also links out to the actual metadata fields within each section. So if that's helpful, I hope it is. And then also, I've got slides that show each section. There's, of course, the biographical information, so people can put a biography at the top, and that's just, they type it in, it's just free text. And along the side, all of the different fields over here, the also known as links to other websites, keywords related to their research, other IDs, and email. I believe the other IDs, that's something that can only get added through the researcher, like connecting their ORCID ID with these other systems. They can't just go in and type in a random ID. And something to note about the email field is that email is set to private by default in ORCID, private visibility. So that will not always show up on a public record. So that's just something to keep in mind. Most people don't go back in and change that visibility setting for their email address, so it usually stays private. On mine, I've made my work email address publicly visible. So just a little side note about that. The other data types: employment history, education, and qualifications. So, so you can see from my example, I have my education, but then I've also added, I got certified as a Scrum Master, if anyone knows what that is. So I put that also because I felt like that was an example of a qualification. So, so any education and qualifications you can put. Invited positions and distinctions. So awards or invited positions, just as it's saying, or, you know, anything that fits into those categories. The data field has descriptions of what you would typically see in there. Membership and service, so membership in a society or association, and then service in terms of being on some sort of committee or what have you. The funding section, that's where you put funding that you've received. Works, and that's where a lot of people were listing the different types of works. And yes, everybody who listed different types of works is correct. Really, this section is designed to have any kind of output. It does not have to be a publication. When people go to enter works into their ORCID record, they're choosing from different categories, and there are other categories. So it could literally be anything. I think there's even a category for artistic and performance. So you could even put a work of art or some sort of music performance or what have you. It could be literally any output that the person has contributed to. Because the C in ORCID stands for contributor. It doesn't even really have to be hardcore research. It could just be any contribution to knowledge and culture. Okay, and then two more. Peer review is something that people can have on their ORCID record, but just know that individuals cannot add their own peer review activity to their ORCID record. This is something that has to be added by an organization using the ORCID API. So you can see an example here. Publons is a really big service for writing these works, for these peer reviews to ORCID records. So in order to get peer review activity on somebody's ORCID record, they have to be doing peer review activity for an organization that is integrated with ORCID and can write that activity to the ORCID record. And then last but not least, the research resources. This is another one that the researcher they can't add this on their own, but only an organization can add this for them using the API. And this is also, you know, it's relatively new, so there aren't a ton of organizations using this yet. But this is definitely of interest if you have some sort of like special lab or equipment. You could even use this for library collections or special collections. It's any kind of resource that somebody is using over the course of their research that you as an organization might want to keep track of, and you can write that to their ORCID record saying, yes, this person used our lab while they were doing their research. So basically you collect their ORCID ID when they come in to use the resource, and then you write this information to their ORCID record. So IMSL is the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory. They are one of the organizations that's already doing this, and they have a really good example of how to do it. So if you are interested in doing this, let me know separately. But those are the different data types that you can have on the ORCID record. Long story short. All right, so next question. What if a researcher does not have data in their ORCID record? I know this is kind of hard as a trivia question because it's almost like there's not really one answer. Does anybody want to take a guess about what happens or what should you do if a researcher doesn't have data in their ORCID record? Because a lot of people, you know, they'll see that a publisher is requiring their ORCID ID or that a funder is requiring their ORCID ID, and maybe they don't have an ORCID ID, so they register for one to meet that requirement, but then they never go back and make sure that they actually have information populated in their ORCID record. So what happens then? Any ideas on that? Going once. Ooh. Okay, so Laura, we need to encourage that. We've had folks set up and only use their first name, but we like to get folks at least adding full name and an institutional affiliation. Yes, absolutely. That it is a big part of making sure that people know the ORCID ID is just one thing and it's great, but to really get the benefit from their ORCID record, they do need to have data in there if they want to leverage it for populating Science CV or helping them save time when they're putting the information into digital measures, that kind of thing. So, so yes, Laura, you are correct. And definitely setting up some kind of baseline requirements, like get your ORCID ID and at least put your most current employment in there. Like, do that. If that's all you have time to do, at least do that. At least have something that can kind of help identify who you are and where you're coming from, aside from just that number. So Laura, I'm gonna put you in the wheel of names. We're getting a long list today. All right. And then let's see, we had some other chats. Christina, it seems like this calls back to the first question. Talk to them about the benefits of actually using it and adding information. Yeah, totally. And this will also really kind of vary depending on the discipline that somebody's in. So some people will have more benefits than others in terms of taking the time to put information in your ORCID record. That will benefit some people more than others, just around the systems that they're using and which systems are set up to transfer data between the two and help people save time. But if nothing else, you know, if you have information in your ORCID record, even if you're not using systems that are connected with ORCID, you can do things like put your ORCID ID in your email signature, or, you know, when you publish, try to always include the ORCID ID. That way somebody who doesn't know you, or maybe they're seeing a paper that you wrote, they don't know who you are, they can click on that and actually get some background about who you are and where you're coming from. When you have that data in your ORCID record, they can be like, oh yeah, this person works at Georgia State, I don't know. And oh, they went to my same university, or I don't know. It just helps people get more of a context around where you're coming from if you have information in your ORCID record. And then Ellen, if the researcher is affiliated with my university, I would encourage them to fill out their record. Yeah, definitely. It's, I think, kind of just part of that educational outreach step of making sure people know that it's important to have information in their ORCID record. Alicia, stress that their ORCID can populate digital measures and pivot. Yeah, so pointing out the systems that ORCID is connected with that can save them time is definitely a good way to help get that point across. And then Christina says, we've been really advertising the ORCID integration with Folio. This will make your annual report easier as a way to get researchers to buy in. Yeah, so it's like, if you have information in your ORCID record, you can save a lot of time when you're doing your annual reviews, that kind of thing. So yes, all of these answers are correct. We're getting so many people on the wheel of names that I'm just gonna put the first person to answer from now on. I was a little lenient earlier. So I put Laura on. Good job, everyone else. These are really great answers, and they're all correct. So our next question is, what if a researcher has invalid data on their ORCID record? So what if they have something on their ORCID record that they actually didn't do? Or maybe it's just, it doesn't make sense. They've entered something that just isn't valid or isn't true. I've gotten this question a couple times, and I'm wondering if anybody has wants to try to answer this or has thoughts about it. It's kind of a hard one, so if you don't know the answer, I will tell you in just a minute, but I do want to see if anybody wants to chime in. Laura, one could manually edit the item in their record. So I would say yes and no. That would kind of depend. So as a librarian or as a research administrator, whatever your role is, you could make changes to somebody's ORCID record for them if you were designated as a trusted individual on their ORCID record. So it's possible to do that, but you might not be a trusted individual on that person's ORCID record, so you might not be able to do that. If you're a trusted individual, you can go to that person's ORCID record and make any changes as though you were that person. So you could certainly do that. But just as an FYI, if you're not a trusted individual, just know that whatever the source of the data entry is, that same source is the only entity that can make a change to that entry. So if it says that if it's the person's name, that means they entered that information themselves, only that person or a trusted individual for that person can make a change. If the information was added from an organization, like through the API, only that organization can update that information. The individual can't go in and make changes to that data. They can delete it, or they can change the visibility setting, but they can't edit data that was added from a different entity. And then I'm seeing Mark, notify them to make a change, have a system that includes ORCID integration that also writes back to ORCID, provided they trust the application. I think these are valid answers. And then I do think that, Laura, I think your answer is valid too. It's just kind of one of those, it depends. So I think I'll put Mark and Laura on the wheel. And talking to Mark's answer, you can certainly, if you notice that there's something weird on somebody's ORCID record, you can certainly contact them if you have their contact information and let them know. I like your point about having an ORCID integration, so using the ORCID API that can add information to people's ORCID records for them. And that's kind of where I was going with this question. So just to round out these answers a little bit, so there's no mechanism that would prevent somebody from having invalid data on their ORCID record, just in terms of like something not being true or having like weird characters that don't make sense. There's no technical mechanism that kind of audits that. So it's very similar in that way to a CV or resume where somebody could put anything on there. We're trusting each other that we are sharing accurate information about ourselves when we give somebody a CV or resume. So it's very similar to ORCID. So just like a CV or resume, technically people can put stuff on there that's not actually accurate or true. But you know, we have to kind of maybe do some due diligence to check that information ourselves if we're actually using that data to make some assessments. But in order to kind of mitigate that, I mean, I don't think it's something that happens a lot. I don't think people are doing it on purpose. I think some people might have something on their ORCID record that maybe got added by mistake, or I don't know. But I don't think people are like bad intentions trying to do this. But that's where, you know, organizations having the ORCID API integration and writing data to ORCID really comes into play, because then you have the source as the name of the organization, and it's more authoritative, it's more trustworthy. If the source is just the person's name, well, they could have put anything on there. We're trusting everybody that they're doing the right thing, and most people are going to be honest with what's on their ORCID record. But the more that we can have organizations using the API to write data to ORCID, the more kind of trustworthy it will be, and the less of that kind of maybe invalid data that we might see. So hopefully that answers some questions and makes sense. Let me put Laura and Mark on the wheel. No. Gotta get out of here and go to the wheel. Oh my gosh, this is getting very exciting. Okay. Let me see. Okay, so that makes sense. And otherwise, they would need to contact the organization to fix that, or ORCID. Yeah, so if an organization adds information to somebody's ORCID record and it's like wrong, this has happened, you know, it happens here and there, where somebody will be like, my university just added a publication to my ORCID record that's not actually mine. And that does happen, stuff like that happens. But yeah, basically they either just contact the university, or typically they contact ORCID support, and then we get in touch with the university, and then they can remove that entry. So yeah, that's generally how that works. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on, next question. I'm keeping an eye on the time too, because I don't want to miss our wheel of names spin. Oh, this is a fun one that I get all the time. How do I find out who already has an ORCID ID at my organization? First person to get a answer that is considered right by me will get on the wheel of names. Anybody want to take a stab? Okay, let's see. Laura. Advanced search, or use the API for institutional affiliation. I'd say that's right. Tony is asking, is there a way to use the API for this? Yes. And Ellen says, look at the monthly membership report. I think that's valid as well. Yes, so all of these are right answers. Since Laura answered first, I'll put Laura on the wheel. So let me do that before I get sidetracked. Okay, so everyone wants to know who already has an ORCID ID at their organization. Oh, I see Clark has posted, use the API to run a query with search with Ringle grid, email address, or institution name. And that's right on the money too. So everybody's getting, oh, and I missed Christina. I was gonna say the premium report, but that doesn't list individual emails. Oh, that's true. You can get an idea of like how many people have an ORCID ID that has your email domain. on the ORCID record, but it doesn't provide a list of all of the individuals. So that's a good point. As a side note, ORCID is working on a member dashboard that will be available to all of us very, very soon. And through that, it gives kind of the same stats as the member report. I'm not certain yet whether or not we will be able to drill down into those reports to get a full list, but just FYI and stand by for that. The resources that I will point to for doing this, of course, you can go to the ORCID website and use the advanced search. So basically, if you go to orcid.org, and this is one way, it's not the best way, I don't really recommend this, but it is oh, I've got an interesting Czech language going on. Okay, there we go. So if you see this search box over here, you can search the ORCID registry. I can like put my name in, for example, and it'll show you, this is me. I don't have a very common name. But if you do just a simple search and get results, you'll see that there's an advanced search option. So you can certainly use this if you're just kind of looking for one-off. I don't know why it keeps going into Czech. I told it to go to English, but anyway, you can do an advanced search here. That's definitely an option. Although when you get those results, there's no way to like download them to a CSV. It's just all there in the website. We do have a blog on our site about finding ORCID holders at your institution. I wrote this about a year ago. There have been some changes and updates since this was written, but it gives you basically the gist of searching in ORCID, and there are caveats to searching in ORCID, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But also I want to point out that we now have, and I can share this link with you all, the UK ORCID Consortium was kind enough to, they kind of created like a search tool interface for finding this kind of information, like who already has an ORCID ID at my organization. And basically it relies on just this URL. And so you can basically plug your organization's information into this URL structure. So your Ringgold ID, your organization's grid ID, your email domain, and just the text string name of your organization. And it will actually search for all of those components in one go. So the example that I have is for University of Utah. And if you click on just that link, it'll take you to a page that looks like this. This just kind of explains what the tool is and how to use it. And it will start loading information, and it will give you the ORCID IDs, people's names, what is in the education and employment fields, any other IDs that they have. If their email address is public, that will show up. And then it'll tell you how many works that person has in their ORCID record. So this is actually what I use to do searches when people ask. If you need help doing a search like this, just let me know. I'm happy to run this for you. Once all of the results finish loading, buttons will appear here where I can download it to a CSV. So to me, this is really the best, most easiest way to get that idea. The caveats though are that there might be people at your organization that have an ORCID ID, but if they don't have any public data in their ORCID record that matches the search terms, the Ringgold ID, the grid ID, the email domain, or just the name of the institution, they won't show up in the search. So there are going to be people who are missing from these search results, so you have to know that. And right now, the search results will include people who maybe were affiliated with your organization in the past, but they might not be there currently at the present. You could do more granular searches per ORCID ID to try to get more of that information, but in this general search, you might have people that are no longer at your organization, so you also have to take that with a grain of salt. And because of that, this search can be very helpful in terms of just getting a ballpark idea of how many people associated with your organization have an ORCID ID so far. See here, you can download a CSV or Excel or PDF. But really, because it's not 100% accurate, we really just recommend to use these results for like planning and assessment purposes. Definitely don't take this list of ORCID IDs and like put them into your repository or any other systems, because it's not going to be 100% trustworthy. That wouldn't be considered authenticated. So just don't do that, but you can use these this information to help you plan and just get a general idea of ORCID adoption at your organization. I wanted to copy that and paste it in to the chat for y'all. Let me see if I can get it. So basically, you can just copy this URL and use your organization's information instead of University of Utah, and run that. And if you want help running this, just send me an email, let me know, and I'll help you. Here's my email address. Okay, we only have 10 minutes. Let's see how many more. We're almost to the bottom. Oh, Clark says another strategy if you're using the API is to exclude anyone with an end date in the employment field. That's a really good point, Clark, and that's definitely something that you can do that is just a little more advanced than this general search. Okay, great. I'm glad to see that people are interested in that. So wonderful. Thanks for sharing that information, Clark. All right, let's see what our next question is. Oh, this was something somebody, so in the registration form, I had asked, as you were registering for this call, if there were any questions that you would like to have answered. I think this is one that did come in from the audience. And I believe, so I put out an announcement, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't remember, but that ORCID is creating a member dashboard that we don't have access to just yet, but we will. And somebody said the dashboard is fine, but how do I continue to get registry data as a CSV like we got prior to the dashboard? So I'm assuming this person is talking about the member reports and how right now it's just kind of a spreadsheet. So I did, oh, okay, Mark, is that what you were? Okay, great. So to answer this, I did put just a screenshot of, ORCID has actually been sending me the aggregate report for all of the US. So just an FYI, this is a PDF, but soon we'll have an actual website that you can log into where it'll have these kinds of stats for your organization. The one that I have access to shows the stats for the entire US. So it's pretty cool. We've got a lot of ORCID IDs that are connected to integrations. And so it shows you, it'll have, you know, numbers like that. It'll have charts, it'll have information about your integrations. If you're writing data to ORCID, it will show that information. So just, this is something that's coming soon. I'm so excited about it. So just stand by for when it's ready for us. So you will start to have access to something like this for your organization, but you will also still have access. It comes along with CSV files of all of this data as well. And you can run a search like we just talked about that has a CSV with you know, all the search results. So while we're switching over to this nice visual dashboard, the CSV reports will still be available. So I hope that answered your question, Mark. And I think I missed a few other chats that came through. For institutional affiliation, is ORCID integrating ROAR? Yes, that is a great question. ROAR is on the roadmap. So ROAR is Research Organization Registry, and it's kind of like the new organizational identifier that is open. And it's kind of merging with Grid ID, or they're taking all of the data from Grid ID and creating ROAR. Ringgold is proprietary. But yes, so ROAR is on the roadmap for ORCID. They are working on getting ROAR integrated in. I'm not 100% sure what that's going to look like. I think they're still going to have options for Ringgold ID and Grid ID, and then FundRef or Crossref Funder identifier is another one too. I think they're trying to accommodate all of the identifiers for organizations. ROAR is definitely on the roadmap, so just stay tuned for that. They're definitely working on it and looking forward to getting that integrated. Let's see, do we have time for one more? Oh, let's just cover this real quick and then we'll do the wheel of names, because I think this is a question that a lot of people still have, which is, can I create ORCID IDs for individuals at my institution? And the first person to get the right answer will get on the wheel of names, and then we'll do the spin. Mark says no. That is correct. Oh, we got some other people saying not anymore. No, that is correct. Yes. So back in the olden days, 10 years ago or something, not that far back, originally organizations were allowed to create ORCID IDs for faculty in bulk. That did not work as planned. There's actually still a lot of ORCID IDs out there for people that don't even know that they have it, and it's just not really doing any good. So the policy now is that the individual has to register for their own ORCID ID themselves. Yeah, opt in, not opt out. That is completely correct. So Mark, I'm going to put you on the wheel of names. And then we'll do the spin, I think. Okay, there are a few more questions left. So I think I will schedule a follow-up for us. So stay tuned. When I send out the recording and stuff, I will, yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna do another call where we can finish covering the rest of the questions. So stay tuned for that. And since we are kind of down to the wire, I'm gonna go ahead and spin the wheel. Is everybody ready? I'm gonna click to spin. And we'll see who the winner is gonna be. It's Mark. All right, so Mark, I will get in touch with you separately for your prize. For everyone else, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. And just stay tuned for the follow-up, and we'll cover the rest of those questions, and you'll have more opportunities to be a prize winner on the Wheel of Names. So yeah, and just stay tuned. I'm going to send an email with the link to the recording, the slides, and the schedule for the next call. So thanks everyone so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. Don't hesitate to contact me if you want to talk more about ORCID, at your institution. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.